Welcome to Using Your Teacher Voice, episode 6. Today, it is standards and the parable of the office chair. Okay, so it's not really a parable, but it could be. It could be. So, several years ago, like almost 20 years ago, when I was teaching in Illinois, I had several students that were in an engineering class. It was kind of like Project Lead the Way today, or what we would call project-based learning. And what it was they paired up with local industry, and they would come in and present the students with a challenge, teach them a set of skills to solve that problem, and then see what creative answer they came up to answer that, to solve that problem. They came in with an office chair, like a computer chair. It had a seat in the back, arms, it was on rollers, and it screwed around, whatever. They came to them and they said, what we would like you to do is, how would you construct this chair in pieces so that it would maximize shipping? We could ship the most possible for the best rate. Because if you think about it, semi-trailers, which everything we get comes to us via a semi, some way, some form, right? Every item comes on a truck somewhere. And so there's a certain length, there's a certain height, there's a certain width, but basically, for all intents and purposes, it's a fixed cost to ship. And if you fill the truck 2/3 of the way, you leave 1/3 of the truck empty, generally height-wise, you've wasted space. There's that much room in that truck that you didn't put product in. And so that 1/3 space cost you money. In all reality, it costs you money. The challenge for the students was to create to take this product apart, put it, into pieces that it could be shipped. Now, they could take it all the way apart and they could make it very compact, but then the consumer had to do a lot of construction on it afterward, a lot of assembly afterwards. So the idea was to use as few pieces as possible, but to maximize the to kind of condense them into as small box as possible so they could get the most of them into a semi at one time. And I share this story because I want you to think of academic standards in much the same way. Over the past few days, I've had several conversations with different people in no official capacity at all, and no actually in an intentional capacity. These weren't conversations that I set out to have, but it's a hot topic in the educational world today. Standards, and the idea that standards cause a lot of frustration with educators because they feel trapped and confined by them. If you take my district, for instance, the state of Indiana has a series of standards. These are what we want you to teach. Then our district has mapped them into a specific series, and then they've set, in English, here are the set of books and stories that align with those standards, and these are the kind of approved list that we'd like to do. And I think a lot of teachers feel frustrated because they feel that those are taking away their ability to be creative and different and original, and try something different and try to connect with their students by doing something, that they feel passionate about, they feel excited about. And I understand that frustration, and I think I've been there too. But in all reality, I think that we as educators should not feel that way, because I think the problem isn't so much that there are standards. I think we should be held accountable for what we do, and I think that there should be some standardization, not to be circular, but there should be some standardizations and regulation across the board as to what happens in schools. But I think the way it gets messaged out to teachers is that they feel those aren't guidelines, they're rules, they're mandates. Let me give you a story to really illustrate that. I don't know who came up with it first. I don't know where it came from. But a discussion we've been having in my school over the past few weeks actually, is how to get more students engaged in discussions. I think that many of us educators know that if we aren't careful, there are 3 or 4 students in a classroom that could literally dominate and take over a discussion, a conversation. That if you allow them to be the ones who talk and volunteer all the time, they're the only ones that talk. Now, there are probably 3, 4 more students that, kind of piggyback on them. They're the me too, and yeah, what he said, and I agree with that. Maybe they give a different example but it's really nothing new to the conversation. They just build on what these first few have already said. That leaves more than half the class disconnected, not involved, sitting on the sidelines, partially on purpose, because they don't want to be involved, and part of it is because they don't feel like they have the skill set to be involved. And so one of the suggestions, and again, I don't know where it came from or who brought it to our school first, but the idea was cold calling, to go around and to ask different people different questions. Don't let certain students dominate the conversation. The device to use for this was a jar with tongue depressors or popsicle sticks, and each stick had a different student's name on it, so that during class discussions you would pose a question, the educator would pose a question, and then pull out a stick and ask that person to answer it, instead of just being open to anybody. This is kind of a neat idea. I think it has a lot of merit and value, and I think that it would work in many situations. We had a teacher. She teaches AP, and she said at first she was very reticent to try it. She's like, really, I can't believe that would be that effective. She tried it, and she's like, in the end, I did see where it could work. I see where the value of it was. She did admit that she didn't think it could work in every situation, but that it did not only kind of put the students on notice. I will be calling on different people, but she said it did kind of remind her that, hey, I do need to be looking at other people too. And I think that's a great idea, and I think that's a very valid point, that a lot of teachers should be looking for these kinds of tools to put in their toolbox of best practices and skills and answers to problems. The problem was that between wherever this idea originated and was brought into our school, between that and a department meeting day, where several departments, the idea was kind of presented, and then the box of popsicle sticks was handed out to the teachers. Go ahead and grab your popsicle sticks so that you can do this too. And again, I think that it wasn't intentional. I don't think that it was meant to be a mandate. But the way it was presented, and in today's educational climate, it felt like a mandate. It felt like a directive. It felt like this is what you have to be doing. And then, with the different teacher evaluations and the different, ways, teachers are being watched and their activities being recorded, and again, I don't think it was intentional, but I think there was some peer pressure that you have to use these popsicle sticks. And so I think that a lot of times as things come out to teachers, it takes on a different message, a different intent. And so I think that first off, a couple closing thoughts here. First off, I think teachers, educators need to be flexible. I think they need to go into things with an open mind and look and say, okay, here's a practice, here's a possibility, here's something I can do to help myself. I think that's where we should start. But I think schools and educators and administrators need to work together to not only find these best practices and build these toolkits, but to message it in a way that is effective, more effective, and that the message goes out in the right way. That we don't want teachers feeling that, look, here's one screwdriver, take all the rest of your screwdrivers out and just use this one. That I think that, the teachers need to understand where these things are coming from, but that administrators need to present them in a way that teachers don't feel expected to use them exclusively. Again, I think these are unintentional things, but I think it's a byproduct of the environment that we're in right now, with all the stress and all the things that are going on and the different layers of expectations that are being laid on educators. This is probably a natural offshoot of that. So now it's incumbent on us to answer that challenge and say, okay, how can we deal with this? How can we work together? How can we not only help our students, but help each other become better educators? I look forward to your comments below or in your audio responses.